The indie scene has given us so many beloved games over the years. From the big guys such as Shovel Knight or the mini classics and Undertale, or with the newer dogs like with Pizza Tower or Another Crab's Treasure, there has been so many iconic characters coming out of the indie scene. But among all the games that came out over the years, there has been one indie series that's not only became a big cult classic, but is also one of the oldest known indie series. And this so happens to be from the developers of WayForward. Now this studio has been around for about 30 years, and the best way to describe them is that they're pretty much a freelance studio in a way, as many big companies would hire them to make various games such as licensed games, or even stuff from big series like with Contra for Konami. And most recently they worked with Nintendo to remake the Advance War games. In between the developments of the local SpongeBob Game Boy Advance game, they also were able to make their own independent IPs, with their most recognizable series is easily the Shantae games. Released in 2002, Shantae is a Metroidvania platformer starring the Half-Genie belly dancer, who is the hero of a town called Scuttletown, as she tries to protect it from the hands of Risky Boots, an evil pirate that's trying to take over the world. The game was received very well by critics, but unfortunately commercial-wise it was a total flop. It's because it released on the Game Boy Color 1 year after the Game Boy Advance released. And we all know how stuff like this happens. WayForward was trying to do more with Shantae despite the commercial failure with several projects over the years. They were doing a direct sequel of it on the Game Boy Advance, but really couldn't find a publisher for it. They had plans for a 3D Shantae game on GameCube, but those plans eventually fell through. There was even another attempt to do a sequel for the Nintendo DS, but again, that fell through as well. It was not until the DSi where WayForward finally got an opportunity to make a new Shantae game as one of the most prominent titles for the DSi Workshop. And after that, Shantae slowly but surely grew in popularity over the years, appearing in a lot of other indie games and even including in Smash Bros. It as a Mii costume. But I think the series' popularity really spiked and gave it the big push was in 2014 after the big success of Shantae and the Pirate's Curse for 3DS and the big Kickstarter campaign of Shantae Half-Genie Hero. The crowdfunding was a massive success as they were able to reach their stretch goal, and in 2016 when it finally released on all consoles including the Wii U's dying life, it received very positive reviews throughout, and over the years they updated the game to include the content they promised during the Kickstarter campaign. But for this video I'm going to be focusing mostly on the main campaigns of the game, while talking about the additional content afterwards. And also I'm going to be doing the Nintendo Switch version of the Ultimate Edition since it includes all the DLC in one. And as for other Shantae games, I'll probably look at them in the future. I am very interested on that Shantae Advance game since it's pretty cool to see a well-known cancelled game getting revived like this. And it's also cool for the fact that we're getting a Game Boy Advance game in the year 2024. But with everything out of the way, let's get started. So the game starts with Shantae waking up in the middle of the night, hearing a mysterious voice that leads her to her uncle's workshop. There, she finds a secret trap door which leads to her to a mysterious little pond area. Here, she receives a little message from the Genie realm saying that it's in danger and only she can stop it. But before she was able to know what's going on, she then wakes up revealing that it was all a dream. And so, the next day, when Shantae asks her uncle about the trapdoor, he says that his workshop doesn't have a trapdoor, as he tries to work on his newest invention, the Dynamo, a machine that once fully operational, can protect Scuttletown completely safe from attackers. And speaking of the devil, Scuttletown gets under attack by the Tinkerbats, being led by Risky Boots. She then steals the blueprints that her uncle was working on, but Shantae was able to get it back no problem. However, after that incident, the mayor of the town then arrives to fire Shantae as the town guardian, as he feels like she's not doing a good job keeping the town safe. And so he immediately replaces her with this other half-genie named Holly, who's pretty much just a snarky brat. But this plot of Shantae being fired doesn't really go anywhere that much, as the main goal of this game is just getting parts for your uncle to build this machine. And along the way, stop the evil barons from causing havoc across the world, as each of the chapters game has its own little story. I already mentioned the first section, but with the second one, Shantae goes to an island full of mermaids, as the maidens of the town are getting kidnapped and being sent to this factory, where they can make them into fake mermaids as she discovers Techno Baron, who's trying to sell them as food for monsters, because the supply stock of food was pretty low, so they decided to cheap things out on it. After taking down the mermaid factory, everyone in town suddenly has amnesia, where it's revealed that Holly, the new half-genie, was revealed to be not a genie, but a apparition entity, as her physical form is made by people's memories, and she was stealing everyone else's memories in Skulltown to feed them to her pets, so she could be remembered. And so, after you defeat the giant beast, Holly just simply vanishes in the air. And that was basically the end of the whole Shantae being placed thing. Afterwards, the plot just goes to very simple stuff, like Shantae goes into a race and then Air Baron shows up at the end. Shantae is told to go to a haunted house, and then suddenly Hypno Baron is here, where he summons the greatest character in the Shantae series. Squid Baron! Honestly, out of all the Shantae characters, Squid Baron's the one I remember the most. With him making jokes about him being more of an important boss in this game, and being upgraded to a filler boss with the stupid smile on his face. I love this guy. Make him a final boss in Shantae 7 WayForward. So yeah, besides that, the plot of the game is very simple, which is fine because with a game like Shantae, the writing of the game relies more on much more lighthearted comedic tone. It's not always laugh out loud for me, but there are some parts of this game that does give me a good chuckle, like how when the mayor fires Shantae and tries to seek out a replacement, he states that the Guardian means I'll get free benefits like a nice tropical home and free rent, with Shantae lamenting that she never gets free rent. Or when Squid Baron talks about how he's excited being the 5th boss, meaning that he might get his own spin-off games one day. With him and Shantae discussing how that should work, which is honestly very just fun and charming. But anyways, so for the gameplay. As I mentioned earlier, Shantae is a series of a Metroidvania platformer. But with Shantae Half-Genie Hero, this one is a bit more different compared to the other games. As well, Shantae was slightly a platformer in previous games, that's why I called it a Metroidvania platformer. This game has a lot more focus on platforming. So basically, instead of playing like an actual Metroidvania, it's more so something similar to a Mega Man type game, where the levels are completely linear with a start, middle, and end, with her primary attack being her hair that she uses as a whip, which is a really good weapon to use since it goes decently fast and has a good amount of long range. But she also has other stuff in her equipment like a special magic meter, which is very useful if you want to have a good both of a defensive and offensive moveset. And this leads us to her most well-known ability, which is the animal transformation. So if you press a button, Shantae will begin to dance, and when she does so, you're able to select certain forms she can become. And this is where the Metroidvania aspect comes into play, because after you clear a level, you'll be able to unlock another animal transformation, and so you go back to that level and try to explore areas that you couldn't before. Like transforming into a cute little monkey so you can jump higher and climb on walls. Actually, I think this one's probably my favorite because how fast Shantae goes in this form. You can also transform into a cute little crab to explore the underwater sections that eventually gets upgraded as a mermaid. Or if you want a good offensive ability, there's also something like the giant elephant, which is pretty much a giant tank, as you pretty much use this one to break giant boulders or something. But the game really opens up once you unlock the final transformation, which allows Shantae to pretty much just fly in the air, as she can explore the vast land. And for additional bonus, there's also these weird novelty transformations as well. There's one where Shantae transforms into a little vase where you can grind on gems. That way you're able to buy stuff from the shop like certain foods or power-ups. There's one that just straight up transforms her into a blobfish that just jumps around like this. And one of the weirdest ones is that she can turn into a small little tank, which reminds me weirdly about the Mario Party minigames. You know the ones where they just strap the characters' heads on a vehicle and call it a day. But as for other things like level design, for example, it's pretty much straightforward. I sometimes feel like the game could be a bit too easy, especially if you stock up on items. Like the first section of the game is pretty much a really good tutorial area. There's a great amount of enemies to fight, the platforming here is pretty solid, and the music is really damn catchy. Although I gotta say, I think the mayor might be onto something about Shantae not being good at protecting the town because the town is literally on fire. And he capped things off with a really solid Risky Boots boss fight. The second area, Mermaid Falls, is another solid area. I like how this one has a great focus on elevation. As in the first section, you're platforming through these little cliff areas. Or once you head to the Mermaid Factory, it has a big focus on these little grappling hooks. And ending things off with a cool little sliding section. Although this damn boss fight with the giant mermaid was a pain in the butt. Especially in the second section where it feels like it drags on too long. And as for something like World 3, well in the desert they try something unique for each of the sections. Like how in the first section you're trying to avoid this sandstorm, in the middle area in this tower you're trying to avoid this giant worm, and the last area is pretty much the platforming section, with the main thing being these Mega Man-like invisible blocks. Ending things off with another really cool boss fight as you have to launch these cannonballs against the worm. In World 4, you're pretty much going across this big race with magic carpets and airships everywhere, with the main hurdle being these damn insta-kill force fields that honestly they just plastered everywhere. But even so, I really like the idea of going through these magic carpets. It really fits with Shantae's whole genie thing. As for the mansion level, this one is probably the weakest one because how much it's kind of barren. It's just not as interesting as other levels in this game. The only thing I really remember about this area is the boss fight where you're going against Best Boy Squid Baron. But besides that, this is probably the easiest level in the game, which is pretty fitting because the next and final one is definitely the hardest, as it uses Shantae's transformations to the fullest and it goes full Mega Man with these instant kill spikes. Just one hit, Shantae explodes. But this is just going through the levels during your first run, because as soon as you get more transformations, the levels in these areas really open up. And this is the part of the game I really adore, because there are so many nifty secrets in this game to explore, and you get rewarded greatly. Whether it's amount of treasures, health upgrades, or even more power-ups, there's definitely a lot of great things to find in this game. And graphically and aesthetically, this game looks really good when it comes to presentation. I really love the 2.5D aesthetic that we're going with the characters being 2D sprites, while the environments being fully 3D. It reminds me a lot of something like the older Paper Mario games, or even Klonoa. Like how the 3D environments works perfectly with the 2D sprites, like everything feels natural. And the hand-drawn sprite animation in this game looks really good as well. And as for the soundtrack, it is honestly very damn catchy. I really love these synthetic instruments that they use in this game. I remember exactly when I head to the Mermaid Factory, and the first thing I noticed was the catchy upbeat tune to it. The only criticism I can think of with the presentation is probably the voice acting, because it does this thing where some of the lines are fully voiced, while some of them are just not. But I'm gonna give them a pass for this one because it's mostly a budget thing. Like, according to their Kickstarter, one of the stretch goals was fully voice acting, but they didn't really met that milestone at all. But for what we got, it's pretty alright. Personally, I don't really care about voice acting when it comes to games like this. And even beyond that, I'm kinda glad that even though we didn't get fully to the stretch goal, what we got is still very plentiful when it comes to extra content. But before we talk about the additional stuff, I think it's very appropriate to wrap up the adventure. So I'm just gonna leave a spoiler tab here. I know this game is close to 8 years old by now, but you never know, there's always gonna be that one person that doesn't want spoilers. But anyway, so after you gather up all the parts for Uncle Mimic, he finally was able to complete his dynamo machine, but once he tries to activate it, it then goes all berserk. The machine then shoots this weird dark energy towards Shantae, and this is where Risky Boots appears, where it's revealed that she swapped out the blueprints of Mimic's machine, so instead of trying to protect Skulltown, it pretty much made a machine to corrupt all magic. And Risky Boots is planning to use this machine to corrupt everything in the genie realm. And so while she heads off with the dynamo, Shantae is stuck slowly getting corrupted with the dark magic. And because of this, it's up to her friends to snap her out of it. And this leads to a 10-minute dialogue sequence of them having the power of friendship or something. I don't know, in the base game, this whole Dark Shantae thing literally goes nowhere because it is immediately dropped in only 5 minutes. It literally reminds me of the whole Sonic being corrupted thing in Frontiers. But this is only for the base game because a few months later, WayForward released DLC that shows more of the story about this. 2 actually, because the first one we have here is that you get to play as Risky Boots, the evil pirate queen. Her gameplay style is basically reminiscent of Shantae and the Pirate's Curse, where in that game, since Shantae was fully human in that game, she uses pirate equipment as her main moveset. But what's different in this game is that you need to upgrade your equipment to make them even more powerful, so it's best to keep an eye for these dark magic chests. Honestly, this campaign is pretty damn fun, especially considering that Risky Boots' control scheme is very different enough to give this game a different type of pace. But as for the Friends to the End DLC, well, in this one you have 3 different playable characters to go through, where it takes place during the events of Shantae getting slowly corrupted, as you go through this weird parallel dimension of the areas you went through before. Although even though there's 3 types of players, they aren't really as interesting as Shantae or Risky. There is a brand new upgradable mechanic in this game for the gems, where instead of using them as currency, you pretty much use them as upgrades of their own. For like every 50 gems, you get even more powerful, but the cost of it is that if you get hit once, you will lose your gems. That I honestly really like, but it's a problem with the gameplay loop of this mode in particular, as it mostly boils down to, if you see a large gap, it's time for Sky to use one for birds. If you see a grabbable object, it's time for Bolo to use his grappling hook. Or if you see an impenetrable shield, it's time for Rhytops to throw her head through it. The gameplay is still very solid, I just feel like it's not as very interesting compared to the other ones. But I can appreciate the fact that this does give us more content to this game. But anyway, so as soon as Shantae's friends were able to snap her out of it, she then restores back to normal. And so she heads off to Risky's hideout, but before you do so, I highly recommend trying to explore the areas one more time. Because surprisingly, there are 2 different endings in Shantae Half-Genie Hero. And to get the true ending, you're going to need to do the task the Barons ask you. This shouldn't really take too long, especially considering the fact that you're exploring the areas, so you most likely have all the collectibles already. But anyway, so as soon as Shantae confronts with Risky Boots, and so it's time for the final battle, as Risky uses all of her power equipment against Shantae. And holy shit, this power wants this genie dead, as she uses giant anchors, giant cannonballs to blast Shantae into oblivion. But she eventually was able to defeat Risky, but she has one final trick up her sleeve, as Risky shows Shantae the new and improved Dynamo Machine, which was the thing she was building during the events of her campaign. And with this, she's going to enslave the entire genie realm to her bidding. The realm then calls Shantae, saying that she needs to destroy the realm, including the Dynamo, to save the world. With the first phase is you trying to overheat the machine, and when you enter the genie realm, you need to use these corrupted genies as a projectile. But as soon as you do the final blow, the machine goes down as Shantae barely escapes the exploding building alive. The day is saved as Shantae's friends congratulate her for saving the world, concluding Half-Genie Hero. And for final verdict, it was still a pretty good damn time. Out of all the Shantae games, I'd say this and Pirate's Curse are probably the ones I played the most and would go back to playing. This game is pretty damn short, but honestly it has a lot of great replay value. Especially if you're going through the various campaigns, some I didn't even talk about, like Police Mode, Jammies Mode, or Ninja Mode. I recommend trying this game just for the replay value, but I especially recommend trying it for the additional content as well. This game might not be as Metroidvania-like compared to other Shantae games, but I still had a really good time playing through this game. But if you want a much more Metroidvania-like game, then I recommend trying Pirate's Curse as well. And who knows, maybe I'll do a video on Pirate's Curse one day, as well as the other Shantae games. But as for the next video, it's finally time. So the next time we'll be here, we'll be talking about the Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door remake. God, I can't believe this is real. But that'll do for today, so thank you for watching and I'll see you later. Bye-bye!